review how the baby, the cardinal movements of how the baby descends with the breech. So the baby generally comes down on the right side, we think. And I'm doing data on that, but we'll see what happens with that data. It looks so far like that's true. And as the baby's descending, it starts in the left sacral anterior position in the brim of the pelvis. This is the brim here. It descends like this, and as it starts to descend, it starts to take on a position of right sacral transverse, or right sacral lateral. Right sacral transverse is usually what we say. And as it's descending, it's taking that position, and the first thing you actually, that is really descending, is the anterior buttocks, whether it's on the right or left side. So if it's on the right side, you're going to see the right anterior buttocks. If it's on the left side, you're going to see the left anterior buttocks. And you're going to see, you may or may not feel this crack, because as it descends, you're going to feel the bottom. You're going to see, and so that's why sometimes when midwives are caught off guard, they see a bottom, they see the cheek, and they don't realize that there is another bottom, and sometimes they'll see a bit of meconium coming out of the anus. And when you see that, the first time I saw it, I thought there was some terrible thing that had occurred on the head, and I went, oh no, of course that's not a head, because you see this black meconium coming out, right? So as it's descending like this, the baby tends to take this torque. It kind of goes this direction, right, as it's descending. And then when it hits the perineal floor, this anterior buttocks, it needs to turn because there's resistance. And there's also some resistance up here from this whole area here at the back, where the sacrum is, and where the baby is descending with the amount of resistance it's getting. It has to turn. It also has to turn because, of course, the shoulders are going to have to fit into the brim. So as it starts to turn, the shoulders fit into the brim best if it turns to a direct anterior. Now you can see all around. This is this way, it's that way. And at this point, what Brecht tells us is that he thinks that the baby starts to form something which he feels is important in this descent. It forms a neat little package, and he calls it the cucumber package. And he feels the plane that it takes is like a plane like this, where it lets the legs come out like that, because the baby throws itself back, and as it goes like that and throws itself forward like this, the baby's head throws back, the legs come out, and then it starts to turn. Now, I believe that the way the baby then turns, usually, that's what my observation has been, it's different from what they observed in Britain, is the baby turns more back to the way it was at the top. It remains in the right sacral anterior position. And at that point, the anterior arm comes out here, and then the left arm. And then the path of least resistance is to continue that way, so that now the baby is going into the sacral notch, and the baby tends to go there. Now what I find is, as it's doing that, I think it is very rare that the baby actually wants to go on the coccyx and the sacrum, because I think that it's a very difficult place to maneuver there, right? I think that I've seen some pictures where they show this terrifying thing where the baby gets stuck there. The baby doesn't get stuck there. They figure it out. They figure out they're going to either turn this way or this way. And if they're coming down the right side, they usually turn this way and go down there. And one of the things that just before the baby turns is that the midwives in Britain came up with, that I thought was brilliant. I think it's the best thing that they've offered to our whole understanding of the cardinal movements, is they think some of the mothers there said that when they're in a position where the head has thrown itself back on the anterior aspect of the mother's symphysis pubis. So the baby's trying to avoid the sacral promontory here. It's thrown itself back here. Apparently, the British women said, "Oh, it feels really odd here. I don't want to be there." And so what they do, because they don't like the feeling, is they fall over on their hands and knees. So what better maneuver as you fall over on your hands and knees than to allow the head to come out underneath the coccyx, right? Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense to me. But I do think that it doesn't always have to come under the coccyx. I think more than not, it comes this direction. It goes across these ligaments. And what I've found on occasion, and this has been on more than one occasion, because in Canada we're not doing MRIs, right? So what I have found on occasion is that the head is not descending very well and I have to go in and get it, okay? Now I just want to back up just a little bit because I want to show you something that we have discovered in Frankfurt. He was studying the types of dystocia that we have. So in the Frankfurt study that we've produced, and this has gone along with my writing up the protocols for them, we feel that there's two places where there's dystocia, okay? So the first place where there's dystocia is when the baby, for some reason, doesn't want to do the requisite turn to get the shoulders out, all right? So we know that on the back, there is a maneuver called the love set maneuver, which I did study in Norway, and it's a maneuver where when the baby's not coming very well, you turn the baby using, all practitioners will know this, turn the baby like this, you hold your hand here, you splint the arm, and you bring the shoulder down like that, right? And then you turn the baby this way, you reach forward and do that, okay? So in both situations there, what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to turn the shoulder that might be a little bit stuck. We're trying to turn the shoulder towards the same direction that the baby might be turning in, which would be this way, right? Like that. Okay, so if you recognize that if you're on the back and you see the baby coming down, and the baby is coming down on the right, let's say it's on the right side, then as the baby's coming down, if the baby does not turn to face you, or conversely, if the baby has turned but turns back, that's a potential sign that we've got some dystocia. And the dystocia is usually that this part of the arm, I actually don't call it shoulder dystocia, I call it armpit dystocia. Because I think what's getting stuck here is this part, right? Because the arm's not really like, there's skin right here, it's not hanging over there. It's getting stuck there. Possibly, yes, stuck there as well, but it's getting stuck as the baby's descending. So the way to get over that is either to turn the baby more with this is love set, right? You turn it more like this. See how that will can you see that? That's going to unstick that. But what Frank came up with was a totally opposite direction. He came up with the fact that maybe rather than turn it that way, you should turn the baby, okay, it's this way, you should turn the baby rather than this way, turn the baby all the way around the other direction with your hands like this. So the baby's like this, you go in, you turn the baby, I need someone to hold this, turn like this, you see that, a whole 180 degrees, and then usually as that's happening, this arm comes out, and often this one will come out as well. And then you turn it 90 degrees back, and then you've got the baby, then we know it's gonna be a go, okay? So that dystocia is an interesting thing, because whether you turn it, the love set maneuver, so you're turning it, you can see this, you can either, okay, here we are, you might either be turning it like this or like this. One way or the other, if you turn it, it's much better to get it out, right? As opposed to pulling it. And we all know that you shouldn't be pulling a breech. We also all know that until you even get to the umbilicus, we just let the baby come out. It's very rare we do anything or do any hands-on. Unless, for some reason, you see the baby coming down, it's rumping, and it's just taking forever, but it has done the requisite turn. You know that the cervix is gone, totally gone, and it just seems to be taking a long time, or there is a heart tone decelerations. Then there is another thing you can do, and what that thing is, I'll show you. But usually the baby's up a little farther when you do this, and this is before you get the shoulder, any shoulder or armpit dystocia. As it's coming down, if it's not able to turn, we do a kind of cristeller in the breech. So I never do cristeller, which seems to be done much more in the Eastern Bloc in Europe. But for the breech, it really works, because if you've got a head down baby, because when I first saw them doing this in Germany, I went, oh my goodness, because I saw this in Latin America a lot in the 70s, and I thought, oh, this is so terrible. I've got a video in Nicaragua of these traditional midwives who were taking their women in, and then this terrible amount of pressure they were putting on the mother's fundus to get a head down baby out. Like, if the head's not fitting, if you're going to continue to bump them like this, it's going to be, you could get a deep transverse arrest or rupture of uterus. But with the breech, it's much more gentle, because you've got a little tiny bottom down there, and all you're trying to do is help the baby continue the maneuvers that it wants to take. So you do some, and what I figured out, so I saw Frank doing this, and he always does it with one hand. Frank's this big, muscly guy, and he can do that. I cannot do that. And I said to Anka, who's also a woman, I said, why don't we just do it this way? What I suggested is the baby, usually the mother's over like this, and I just get around, I get on a stool beside the bed, I get up like this, and here's the mom's abdomen, and we just do this, and the baby descends, and it's incredible. When you watch from down below, as you do that thing, the baby just comes out down like this. And we usually do it during a contraction, not in between a contraction. It's to help the contraction. And then usually when you do that, it just comes down like this and turns, and the whole thing works. There's some concern that if you do that, even though it's not pulling, it's pushing from above. We always say power from above. Either you can use oxytocin as well, but as midwives we tend to use less oxytocin, and I tend to use more mechanical things. As you're doing that, it is possible that you could cause the same trouble with the shoulders that you do when you're pulling. But it hasn't been my experience that that's a real problem. However, in Frankfurt, they do MRIs on all first babies, all for women having their first babies, okay? So in Canada, we don't. But in Canada, I'm doing 80% of the babies that I'm doing are first-time moms. Right? So, for first-time moms. So, although we don't do MRIs, I think I do run into more of the dystocia with the head than the average, than they're having in Europe, because they eliminate a lot of the people that might have a more of a dystocia. But I figured out a maneuver to get the head out. So what it is this. I figured out, first of all, and you see the head here, so you can go in, one of the things you can do is you can do, the Marisol smelly beats, which is to go like this, right? And like that, right? You're pushing the occiput there. That works to some extent, but on this position, it really helps to go in like this with your hand, like this. And I realized as it was coming down that I could actually go in farther with my whole hand. Why? Because I'm a woman, I've got a tiny hand, And I was thinking in terms of forceps. So on that particular occasion, I used two hands, but one hand went farther than the other, and she'd already given me an episiotomy. So it's just like when you're doing you have a shoulder dystocia and you're trying to use all these maneuvers, and one of the things you find is when the woman's on her hands and knees, often you can get in there more to maneuver. It's the same thing with the baby's head that's breached. So I went in like this, and I found with one, but I remember at this point it was 2013. It's amazing, I remember all these births. It was on this side, I remember now. So I could get my hand right up to the biparietal. So keep in mind, so this is where my hand is. It's contacting right there, okay? And the other hand was not as high, but it was helping me maneuver as well. And the biparietals are really crackly, you know, like you push them in, they're quite fragile. But I realized that forceps are highly dangerous. They can go in and they can really damage. Your fingers can figure out the best place to figure out where to have the application, and then you can get the head out much more easily like that. And it just came very naturally. And she didn't have any more of a tear. She had an episiotomy, but she didn't have any more of a tear. So the next time I did that, I thought, I don't need two hands. I just need one hand. Like, it's not a, you know, you don't need salad tongs. You need you need the leverage. And often just doing this, like this, will work. And Gail Tully, my good friend Gail Tully, said she did try this once herself. She could get it right there. But I have on a number of occasions now gone in with my whole hand to get it down. And it's sometimes to do two things. It's sometimes to, if you've got a baby here, okay, you've got a baby coming here, it's on the right hand side and it's not coming out. You can either go like this and in, and bring it like this, and at the same time you're doing it, you're flexing it, but you're also turning it, because you're flexing it and bringing it underneath the coccyx and then turning it to face you, right? But you can also do this. You can sweep the other way and go that way.
Oh. Okay.
But so far for me, I've had better occasion to do this, and sometimes you can use it. The same maneuver I was telling you, we named the crowning touch.
Okay.
And I've called it the crowning touch because it's the last thing you have to do if you really think you need forceps, but you don't really need forceps. And I think it's much less dangerous than forceps to the baby's head.
Yeah.
I have to do the data still on the actual effect on the mother's perineum, because on that one we had a bad tear, but that was because I put in a second hand because I was trying to get the cervix, which didn't exist, by the way. It was there, but way up. I didn't need to get my second hand in. So she had a bad tear, but the baby had Apgar's of 9 and 10 to get a name for themselves. But for me, it's a delightful, elegant term because it's so the fear of breech birth. It so reaches that feeling of ineptitude and fear that people have about breech, because very few obstetricians today or midwives really do breeches a lot. And the number of times, if you're using an upright position, that you actually need forceps is not very much. So you're not going to have a lot of experience doing it. And what nicer thing than to put your hand in, feel around, feel where you can have a contact, where it's working, and maneuver it in a way that is much more human. The only thing is, if you're a man with really big, thick hands, it's not going to work.
Okay. How do you guide the baby?
You're trying to, the baby is, you're guiding the baby up, but very often the baby just seems to be really caught and isn't doing it on his own. Sometimes it's because I have found twice that I have used it, it's been because the baby was posterior and I had to turn the baby, and then the head sometimes gets somewhat left behind and extended. So that's when I've had to use it. I've also had to use it in the first time that I was telling you about, just because the mother it just seemed to be a tight fit. Sometimes it's because the baby is coming down on the sacrum like this, and so what you have to do is you have to get it away from the sacrum to get it like turned. And then sometimes you're then bringing this down here and bringing the whole head down here. But what is amazing is whatever you go to grab, you will find that it works. Like you whatever works. And often it's just
more like a soft voice.
Well, you're doing two things. You have to be aware that what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the head away from the sacrum, flexed and turned. So you're bringing it down this way. If it's not moving, then you might want to put in another hand, but just here, not like way in the perineum, but it's usually, because if the head is right, it's not often too far. You're going like this. If it's way, you're often doing this in the mid pelvis though. It is, you have to get your hands in there. So this is really helping it. right? You can see that's flexing it. Because it's the extended head that is your trouble. But it's also the head that's not turning, like it's either it is caught on the sacrum, and so you have to turn it there, and then you might have to turn it back again when it comes out. The principle is you want, in the end, once it hits the perineum and is freed of coccyx, once the baby's head is freed of the coccyx, then you're pretty good to go. But still, sometimes it goes like this, and it's turned like this, and so the other maneuver you can do when you come to here, and you want to make sure the head is turned towards you, is we do something which Frank in Frankfurt came up with, which I thought was brilliant, and I called it, I named it, I called it the Frank nudge, because I think he does deserve to have this named after him. And what it is he showed me that how he had figured out one day that if you go like this on a baby, if you push up, they're coming down, right? So here, so what you're trying to do is you're trying to push to get the baby's head flexed. You push up on the shoulders. You push up on the shoulders, and it tends to bend the head. So the reason for that is because the insertions for the sternocleidomastoid come in, and they're inserted right around here. One of the physiotherapists realized that, and so it tends, and the sternocleidomastoid is responsible for bending the baby's head. So if you can get it activated, then the head will turn. And it's just a mechanical thing as well. If we do it in two ways. One is with your thumbs, and you can kind of fold the baby at the back and also push it this way. But another one often that just works is when you just take two hands and then you're at the same time trying to flex the head. You do this like this, right? Yeah. You're doing this nudge, and you're doing this. All these little contexts you have, it's whatever works. It really becomes quite intuitive.